Good morning. Welcome to Bob's Coffee Chat. Very happy to have you all here today. And I'm really excited because today we have for our presenter is Brian Wagner. And the focus on Brian's presentation today is, do you have blind spots? What if your biggest blind spot could be your greatest strength? Our speaker, Brian, today knows about blind spots. His resulted in brain surgery. It changed him so much that he wrote the book entitled, Sometimes It Does Take a Brain Surgeon. He grew up on a tomato farm in Northwest Ohio as the youngest of 10 kids. A former IT salesman, Brian is now a speaker and author while working at the Ohio State School for the Blind. He has a clear focus. It is to help others identify and move beyond their blind spots. You could say he's on a mission. Since his brain surgery in 2011, Brian has given a TED Talk, published a book, and ran a half marathon, all as part of his effort to inspire others. Brian is here today to share ideas that will help us move beyond our blind spots without the need for brain surgery. Please join me in welcoming Brian Wagner.
What sets you apart? What makes you different? On March 4th of 2011, I woke up and I couldn't see. I stumbled on my way to the restroom and I flipped on the light switch. It was still dark. When I turned towards the mirror, I could see some slits, some of the light coming out of the slits in the bottom of my eyes. When I felt my face, my whole face was swollen, and my eyelids wouldn't open, both of them. My wife heard the commotion and she came downstairs. She had a sound in her voice that I never want to see again. Brian! Brian! What happened? Well, I don't know. I was blind. It was as if my whole life passed before my eyes. It was as if my life was over. As soon as we were able to, we went off to the ER. And there at the ER, the doctor came in. And he said, Mr. Wagner, it appears as though one of the cavernous malformations, the cavernous malformation in your brainstem is bled. Its blood is putting pressure on the nerves that control your vision. We're recommending that you have brain surgery. Brain surgery? Wait a minute. The doctor's always told me never let someone operate on our brainstem. What's changed? The problems we have are only going to become worse and more frequent. Worse and more frequent. Worse and more frequent. Time out. Ever since I was 10 years old, as a 10-year-old boy playing football with my mom, or playing football in my front yard, I was told never let someone operate on my brainstem. I'll never forget the first time for football camp that they announced that I had football camp coming up. But before that, my mom would be coming out. My mom would be yelling, Brian, you've got to come see this. It's the registration for the Elmwood Royals football camp. You've always wanted to play football, and you've always wanted to be an Elmwood Royal. This is your chance. Now, Mom was a little more excited than I was. But I was excited. I got to go play football with my friends. That's all I ever wanted to do. And then the third day of football camp, and I blacked out. I don't even remember what we covered. I was rushed to the hospital and I had surgery. Surgery where they place a shunt in my head that drains excess cranial fluid from my brain to my abdomen. It's because I had hydrocephalus. That's cephalus, not syphilis. I was 10. But also, after that surgery and had all that done, they told me that I couldn't play football anymore. So I went to my grandma's house with my mom, and I was walking in the door, and Grandma asked how I was doing. I said, Grandma, I started laying the sob story on her about how I wasn't going to be able to play football anymore. She said, Brian, life's going to turn out differently than you planned. Don't be afraid to reimagine your life. And always look for what makes you unique, and then use that to make someone else's life better. I really didn't know what to do with that information at the time. I mean, Grandma had some sage advice, but I was 10, so what was I going to do with that? So let's come back to the ER. Worse and more frequent. I was blind, and my problems were only going to get worse and become more frequent. It's at this point the doctor said to me, Mr. Wagner, we're recommending you have brain surgery, but you go to Phoenix, Arizona for that. So on April 1st, no fooling, I was flown to Phoenix, Arizona, where I had brain surgery. Now, the one doctor in Phoenix is the only one that we'd recommend for this surgery. Just one. There was one guy. Have you ever had a time in your life where there was just one person for you? Maybe it was a spouse, or maybe a parent, or maybe a coach, a mentor, a teacher that helped you to get from where you were to where you wanted to be. Do you remember who that one person was? Write that person's name down, if you would, please. Actually, if you would, put it in the chat box and let me know who that one person is. When I was in Phoenix, I had brain surgery, like I said, and the next day, actually that same day that I had surgery, I was walking the hall. Now, I did have a little curtain closure assistance from my brother. I mean, there are some things that nobody needs to see. But the next day, one day after having brain surgery, I was discharged from the hospital with a little bottle of extra strength Tylenol. I got back home, and I was surrounded by encouragers. The biggest encourager that I had was my wife, Connie. She encouraged me to go for walks. Now, I had no idea she wanted me to go down such treacherous terrain, but she wanted me to go down this sidewalk. And the sidewalk had ledges on the left and ledges on the right. And then there was the undulations. Undulations. Now, isn't that a fun word? But the undulations were different if I approached them from the other way. If I walked down that sidewalk the other direction, the undulations changed. Much like in your lives, with anything you have. If you look at a problem or an issue or something good, if you look at it from the other person's perspective, your perspective changes. That's what we all want to do. I had another encourager, and that was my daughter, Jess. When she was 13, the Father's Day after I had brain surgery, she wrote me this letter. It's pretty special, and I'd like to read it to you. Dear Dad, happy Dad's Day. I hope you have a great day because you definitely deserve it. All the cards and TV commercials always say, my dad's the best. But they're all lying. You're the best ever. Sure, Other people's dads are great. They're younger than you, and they're sportier, and they're funner. But you've got something that other dads don't have. Bravery. Even after everything you've been through, you still get out of bed in the morning. You still joke around and play with us and cook on the grill, even though you only have half one good eye. But you do more still. You teach me that even though you go through the most toughest, most grueling things, that if you just believe that God is right there with you through everything, that everything turns out okay in the end. You'll make it out alive. Not always unscathed, but alive. And give me that hope, that sense of belief. Well, I'd take that over a dad with two good eyes any day. Love, 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 love. Yeah. Now, when's the last time you received a letter like that? I got a better question. When's the last time you wrote a letter like that? You remember that one that we just talked about? You can write that person a letter right now. With that, it'll change that person's life forever. But what's more than that is, it's going to change your life forever. Because you are going to become an encourager. And you're going to make other encouragers out of the world. And that's really what we all want in the end. We want to have encouragement. We want to know we're loved and encouraged by other people. Now, you can use some of the things that Jess did in her letter. Jess opened my eyes. She did what no doctor could do. But with that, she told me that I should stop comparing myself to other people. Sure, other people's dads are great. They're younger than you, they're sportier, and they're funner. But she told me what I had, what I was to her. So tell that person what they are to you. Tell them that they can stop comparing themselves to other people as well. Because they were there for you when you needed them most. Just told me to keep my faith. And faith is something that's important to me. Different faith for different people. I understand that. But understanding your faith is important. Understanding that there's a higher power is important. And then what's most important of all is to know when to write that letter. The time is now. And I encourage you to write that letter and to clear your calendar and make it a point of writing that letter. Well, all this made me realize that I had blind spots. Now, typically when I drive, which I don't drive anymore, but when I used to drive, I had to deal with the person in the passenger seat. They would see my blind spots. A blind spot is anything that's preventing you from seeing what you should be seeing. So they would see through my blind spot and they would help me with that. It also reminds me of nicknames that I had. So I have many, many nicknames. Growing up as the youngest of 10 kids, like Bob mentioned, you get a lot of nicknames. They used to call me Bernie and Wiggy and Wags, all those kind of typical names. But I was in IT sales for a while. And in IT sales, they also gave me a nickname there too. The one name they gave me was Buy It Back Brian. Now, I don't know if that was really a good name, but it was a name that I got. Well, we're out in sales calls. Typically, you have a sales guy, which is me, the guy that knows the numbers. But then you have a smart person. The smart person, girl or guy, they know all the bits and bytes. And this one occasion, it was a guy that was with me, and we went up to one of our sales calls. And we walked into this building, and we walked up to the guard shack, and there was a nice lady in her uniform, you know, getting ready to take care of whatever I needed. And I said, "We're here to see Bill." And she said, when she knelt down with her Sharpie in her hand, she was going to make out a name tag for me. She knelt down or leaned down and started to fill it out. And she said, "Well, what's your name?" I said, "My name's Brian." Without looking up, she said, "How do you spell that?" I said, "My name's Brian with one eye." I looked over here at smart guy. What's going on? Brian with one eye? I love it. Oh, that's hilarious. I don't know what it was. Maybe I got into a point where I just kind of forgot about me. Forgot about the whole disability that I had with one eye. And I said what I said. But that's when I became to know that's who I am. I'm Brian with one eye. Who is it that you need to come to know that you are? Maybe you've stepped into a different role. Maybe you've written a book and you need to know that you're an author. You need to tell people that you're an author. Maybe you've done other things where you've gotten a new position or whatever the case may be. Understanding that will be helpful as well. And telling other people about that. That's really where it matters, is when you start to tell other people about your new role. So yes, I do have the URL. The URL is brianwithoneeye.com. And you can spell it either way. Brian with one eye or an I. E-Y-E or an I. Well, there's many, many things that I was hoping to go through with you today. In an effort to save time, I want to tell you a few stories. The stories are ones that will make you laugh and make you cry, but they're also ones that will inspire you. One of these stories is about my dad. My dad was a farmer, and one day, you know, so people have said that my dad and I have many, many similar traits. Well, one of those is our smile. Anyway, you know, we had a very similar attitude. My dad passed away about 6 years ago, but I'll tell you, we both had this optimistic attitude, and we were all full of life. We were full of life because we had vision. We would go to birthday parties or church or even a funeral, and we would have a good time. Now, I do remember that one time my dad bought the farm. Not really bought the farm. He bought a farm. Well, he went to town one day and he went to the attorney's office, and he went to bid on or to listen into a silent auction. Now, I'm not really sure how you listen into a silent auction, but that's what he went to do. Well, he was there, and when it came time for him to make a bid, he made a bid, and he outbid everybody. And then he realized he just bought 150 acres, and it was more money than he ever thought he would spend. So on the way home, he all of a sudden had the realization, I got to tell my wife about this. I'll never forget when he walked in the door. My mom was sitting on a 5-gallon bucket in the middle of the utility room. She's like, Wally, how are we ever going to pay this money back? How are we going to pay it back? That's right. My dad's name was Brian Wagner. But he had unbridled optimism. That unbridled optimism, some call it foolish optimism or crazy optimism, but it's unbridled. And that optimism allowed him to go forward and to get that ground. And that ground is still in our family today, some 40 years later. It's incredible. In order to show that he had that unbridled optimism, that allowed him to do what he didn't know that he could do, but he did it. Wow. I could go on and on about that forever. So this is where he had vision. Now, other people that are encouragers, I told you about some of the encouragers in my life. Well, these are my personal family, my wife Connie and my 3 kids. Every year we get together for holidays and we would take these pictures and we would put them in a Christmas cards or whatever. So, this one year I looked at this picture because it was really hard for me to step in front of a camera for the first couple of years. But I finally got to a point where I said, wouldn't it be nice if I wasn't the only one winking in this picture? Wouldn't it be nice if I wasn't the only one winking in this picture? I said to my kids, I said, would you wink with me? And they said, sure, Dad. And then they did it. They winked. And yes, it's funny. It's a funny picture to see. I wish you could see it. But my daughter has kind of a smirk and a kind of a half face, and she looks really, really funny. And the other kids are there as well. We would have these pictures taken, and that picture started me to think about what my wink. So I have a permanent wink, and I encourage people to wink with me when I go out to conferences. So let me ask you, what is your unique value prop? What makes you different? Once you know what that is, your mental and physical limitations, then you can use that as a lever. And then, much like I use that as a lever. I've used that with my speaking career, as well as I work at the Ohio School for the Blind. And with the Ohio School for the Blind, I use that uniqueness to help me to get that job, to help me to come across to kids authentically, and just have relationships. So there's lots that I can tell you about. The one big thing that I do at these conferences that I speak at is I take pictures with people. So I would normally take pictures with you if we were all at a conference together. In this conference, or in this picture, I would encourage you to wink. And when you wink, I want you to be thinking, if this guy next to me, meaning me, knows what makes him unique, I wonder what makes me unique. Because if you can find what makes you unique, then you can discover how to leverage that, and how to use that to make someone else's life better. It'll make all the difference in the world. So I can hear it now. Brian, there's nothing unique about me. I'm pretty normal. I don't have any big stories like you have. But I'm willing to bet you that if we were to sit down long enough and to have a conversation, we could find what makes you unique. And then it'll be up to you to find how to leverage that to make someone else's life better. So that's why I wrote the book. Sometimes it does take a brainstorm. Actually, the real reason that I wrote the book was for my kids. But going beyond that, to make a leverage out of that, that has been one of the most helpful things I've ever done. So I want to know who out there would like to share a wink with me. You can take a picture of yourself, send it to me at brian@radicalvision.com. And it's brian@aradicalvision.com. And that's spelled ARADICALVISION.com. And I look forward to seeing that. There's so much more that I have to share with you today, but for now, we're going to leave it there. So it's about, we got about 5 minutes. Well, let me tell you a little bit about what we do to help people to sink in that aspect. We have a form called the Wink Workbook. Yes, the Wink Workbook. Everything has got to do with this wink. So if you go to aradicalvision.com/wink, you'll find this workbook. So it's aradicalvision.com/wink. You'll find the workbook that I told you about. You can download it, and then you can understand what it means to have that the wink. And really, the wink, the W stands for why. Why is it important to know what makes you unique? Well, for me, it's important for me to stay positive and to know what makes me unique. Yes, I know what that is, but being positive is one of those important things. I have to be intentional. I have to be concentrated on that, because there are many, many times that there are things that get in the way. You know, the news gets in the way of me being positive. So I have to take my news with moderation. I have to listen for specific news, because there's good news out there. There's news that I need to hear, but then there's also a lot of negative stuff that just, we don't need to go there, at least on a daily basis. So the I is for intentionality. Being intentional with what makes you unique. If you write those things down, that's what the workbook is all about, is to write those things down, the why, what's your purpose, and talk about why it's important to you. And then the I is for intentionality. In that section, you're gonna write down what gets in the way of you being unique. So you may want to have a better relationship with your spouse or your son and daughter. Maybe you want to lose weight. Maybe you want to eat more healthy. Well, with intentionality, you want to know that what gets in the way are things like French fries. If you want to eat and lose weight, you know, if it's your son or daughter, the screen time, that gets in the way of you, having a better relationship. The N is for a new way of looking at life, a new way of thinking. So for me, I wanted to have a new office, and I was all about coming down here into my basement and having a new office. But that new office, the office that I had, was about 100 square feet. So I went upstairs looking around, and I had this tape measure out, and I was looking for different spots to put an office upstairs. And my wife looks at me and she's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm looking for a new office. It's my spot downstairs is too small." She said, "Well, why don't you just move your office into the other side of the basement that's about 300 square feet as opposed to the 100 square feet you have?" Well, that's a great idea. So I moved my office. She gave me a new way of looking at life. But that's the N. And the K is for kinesthetic. You can't have the W-I-N, the win, without the K. Once you have the K, you have the wing. And with K, kinesthetic means taking action, doing something with your life, doing something with whatever your purpose is, and knowing how important that is. It's been great talking with you here today. It's been great just being a part of this group. Bob is such a good friend, and I look forward to having further conversations with you all. I'm Brian with one eye.
I love it, Brian. Thank you so much. I love that. I always say I'm Bob with one O, but that comes from a different aspect. Well, thank you. That's going to end the recording portion of the presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions.